Hi, I'm Dawn, and this is where Shabby meets Bling. It's July, so tonight's project is going to be Christmas in July. It will involve some clearance shopping and some thrifting, but it's gonna equal Christmas in July. Now, like my jammies say, let's get cracking.
This is Gingerbread in July, a Can't Sleep Creations collaboration. I would like to thank my co-hosts, Jody from Jody at Southern Seasons and Monica from Up All Night DIY for joining me tonight. You're going to find the links to their channels and this playlist in my description box below. So, a while back, I did an after Christmas video and I picked up this guy and this guy. And tonight, I am going to alter them. Yes, I am. So here they are. Here they are. I feel like they're not quite nutcrackers. And they're not quite toy soldiers. But I want to make nutcrackers out of them. And that's what we're going to do. If you take a look at their little round nose and their lack of jaw moving action and the hole in the middle, definitely not nutcrackers. So we have a lot of work in store, and it's going to start with cutting off their little arms. Well, each of them is going to lose part of an arm. That's where we're starting. These were purchased after Christmas 2 years ago, and they were originally $24.98, and I got them for 75% off. Not too shabby. So the goal here is to create an arm for each of these, just one arm for each of these nutcrackers that is bent so it can hold something. You know how nutcrackers, they have like a little staff, they might be holding a birdhouse or a basket or whatnot. Well, we need to cut each of their arms at a 45-degree angle and then swap their arms that were cut off and then reattach them. So it's a little Christmas Frankenstein-y kind of situation happening here. What I've done is taken a piece of wax paper and a piece of blue painter's tape, laid it out, used my speed square, and created that 45-degree angle. Now I'm going to take the piece of tape and tape it onto my nutcracker's arms. But first, I need to find the center of each of their arms because I don't want the elbow to be where it shouldn't be. It needs to be in the middle of the arm to look proper. So I find my middle spot and I mark it with my marker, and then I'm going to apply my tape. I add an extra piece of blue tape to hold it in place, and then I get out my coping saw. And this is where the surprise came in. This thing is styrofoam. I really thought it was plastic. So I braced myself and then I started sawing, and it was just like, why is this going through so incredibly easy? And then I saw the little white flakes coming out, and it's just like, okay, this changes the whole design. I was gonna create a faux cavity and a faux mouth and a faux handle on the back, but now I can actually carve into this thing and make it look real, like a real nutcracker. But first things first, this arm needs to come off. Now, once I cut his arm off, it's going to leave a flat section on the side of his body, and his arm is going to be flat on one side, so I will have to deal with that as well. Once I get nutcracker number 1 taken care of, I move on to my second nutcracker and get his arm removed. Then it's time for some major repairs. This is where the old switcheroo takes place. Now, I could just turn the arm upside down, but then the part that I have to repair would be more visible. It would be on the outside. So if I swap the arms, the place that I have to repair is going to be on the inside and less visible in the end, because there's no way I'm going to get it as perfect as the finished part of the arms of these little nutcrackers. What I'm using here is called dry decks. Its dry time is really quick. It's a real quick. It goes on pink, and when it's dry and ready to be sanded, it turns white. That's why I'm using something that's going to dry fast, because now that this thing turns out to be a styrofoam, I created a whole lot more work for myself because I'm going to be cutting into it in the center of his little body as well. So I'm using a product that's going to move this project along a little quicker. I fill in the sides of my little nutcrackers where it was flattened so it curves out like his coat was never damaged in any way and like it was always there. I even repair the cut where I remove the arm, and then I will move on to the arms themselves and create a curved surface all the way around, so it might not be as obvious that they were flattened by my coping saw at one point in time. Now it's time to get rid of the little button noses that really make them look like toy soldiers. I'm using the Dry Deck spackling compound to build brand new noses for my gonna-be nutcrackers, because you know the way nutcracker noses look, they don't look like that. They don't look like that. They're not a button. They almost resemble a hawk beak because they're curved. The noses are curved at the top at the bridge and then come down. And that's what I'm trying to build around the little button nose. I'm trying to build it up so that it has that hawk-like appearance. I keep adding the dry decks until I get to the point where it is relatively the shape I'm after. Then I set it aside for just a little bit. You can see it has started to turn white, and it is not all the way white, it is not all the way hardened. So I'm able to take my sculpting tool and refine the shape of that nose just a little bit more. Once I'm satisfied, I set it aside and let it completely harden. Now it's time to sand all of our repairs. The sides of their little bodies, their noses, and their arms. Your grit of your sandpaper will be determined by how long you let the dry deck sit. So if you catch it right away, you can use a finer sandpaper like I am right here. Now it's time for the biggest change of all. We're going to create that cavity that, if this were a real nutcracker, would house the actual nut cracking mechanism. Nut cracking mechanism. I am using a paint stick because that's what I'm going to use for the handles later on. On the back is a couple of old paint sticks. So I'm using the paint stick as a guide as to where I want to cut out that little cavity. I'm also using it to measure across the top where his bottom little jaw will be. That will not be cut out, but I will go around it. I will carve around it so you have the illusion that there's a bottom jaw. So I get my markings exactly where I want them. Then I bust out my knife and I start carving on this guy. It's like a real life game of operation, and I'm the surgeon. Poor Nutcracker. Poor Nutcracker. I keep rotating him from front to back to make sure I get the little opening even on both sides, and then I carve around his little jaw. Once I get my opening carved, I fill in the sides with the dry decks and set it aside to dry. Now it's time to reattach the arms, and remember we flip-flopped them, so this is the cutoff part from the other Nutcracker, but it's going to go on just like that. It's going to create a nice right angle. I'm using a heavy gauged wire, and I'll be using 2 pieces for each of their arms. I create L shapes, right angles with my wire so that it will follow the position of the arm that I'm trying to create. I will be gluing the wire into each part of the arm with hot glue, but the actual point where the arm is going to be connected to itself will be glued with 3-in-1 glue. I hope that makes sense. Once I've attached the arm, I add some painter's tape and set it aside and let it dry and work on the other Nutcracker. Now we get to paint. I like the fact that this thing is flocked because once painted, it is going to give me the look of a cookie crumb, which is perfect because I want this guy to look like a giant cookie. I am using leftover paint. Everything and anything that is almost empty bottle-wise of paint, I am using for my base coat. This paint happens to be cinnamon. I am using all the remnants of my paints that are in the tones of browns and tans. Here we are after a very good first coat of paint. Now you can see his nose and his arm and the side of his body. They don't look like the cookie crumb like that painted flock. So we need to do something about that. Here you can see where I joined his arm. I even added extra support with more wire. There's a good look at his elbow, and you can see that the side there is all smooth where I repaired it, not like the rest of the Nutcracker. And once I turn him around, you're gonna see the opening that I created for him. So cool. Look at that. Pretty darn cool. I'm happy so far. This is my solution for creating that flocked look. What I'm doing is I'm taking the Podge, busted out the Mod Podge, and this is just matte Mod Podge, and it doesn't even matter. But I'm using Mod Podge and sand. You heard me, sand, to create the look of the flock. I apply a very healthy coat of the Podge, and then I come back with the sand and I sprinkle it over top. I do this in every area that I repaired, so that way you're not going to be able to tell all that much where the flocking ends and the sand begins. I am using a brown decorative sand that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. You can use any color of sand you want as long as it's a fine sand. They even carry decorative sand at the Dollar Tree. As I said, it doesn't matter what color you're going to use because we are going to paint this. We're going to paint it all gingerbread color. That's right, gingerbread. I'm even using the Mod Podge and sand to repair dents and other repairs, like where I added that extra wire in his elbow. It will also help disguise his elbow joint. I even coat that internal cavity that I created where his Nutcracker mechanism would be. And I don't forget his nose or the inner part of his arm because it all needs to look the same. I'm using that paint stick again to mark out the area that I need to carve out to accommodate his Nutcracker handle. This paint stick is actually going to be the handle, so I'm marking the length that I'm going to cut it. Then I'm going to trace around it to indicate the area that I need to carve out to accommodate this handle recessed within the Nutcracker's body. To make the handle more substantial, I will be gluing 2 of the paint sticks together. Now he gets to get painted gingerbread. I mixed this color. I think it's gorgeous. And I used 3 different paint colors to make this happen. The paint colors I normally use when making gingerbread weren't available, so I picked up these. I am using 3 bottles of Crafter's Collection Chocolate Brown. This is from Hobby Lobby and it's only 49 cents a bottle. 1 bottle of Plaid Folk Art Matte Raw Sienna and 1 bottle of Crafter's Collection Cedar Bark. Once again, from Hobby Lobby. Both of my Nutcrackers will get at least 2 coats of this really pretty gingerbread paint. I bought extra in case I need to mix another batch. I don't want to run out. Once it's dry, I will carve out that back section to accommodate his handle. Here's what it looks like once I have finished carving out the little niche where my paint stick turned Nutcracker handle will be recessed. My 4 paint sticks have been cut and they will become 2 handles. I am wood gluing and hot gluing the sticks together so that I get something fast. Quick adhesion. Gotta be fast with this project. Once my paint sticks are glued together, I will hot glue them inside the cavity in each of my nutcrackers. I also fill the gap in between each of the paint sticks with some of my dry decks. Here is one of my nutcrackers with the handle complete. You can see I Mod Podged and sanded the handle, then painted it over with that beautiful gingerbread color. So now the whole nutcracker is uniform, ready to be decorated. This is basically the look I'm going for, a monochromatic with just gingerbread and white coloring. I want them to look like they were three-dimensional cakes or cookie gingerbread standing up on their own. The first thing I'm going to do is create hair because I feel like his hair features are going to dictate what the rest of the whole nutcracker will look like. I could paint hair on him. That wouldn't be very dimensional though, and I want something extremely dramatic. I want a dramatic nutcracker, like he's going on stage and he's going to perform for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some curls, some curly hair that's going to look similar to this and this. I want him to look like he had rollers in overnight. So that's what we're going to do. I am going to use cardboard to make his curls. I am measuring out a little over 1 inch strips of cardboard, and each one of these strips is going to be a curl. I'm using my paper cutter to make sure that I get all of my little curl strips exactly the same. This cardboard is simply packing cardboard, and I purchased a whole box of it a long time ago for projects like this and for shipping. Strangely enough, tonight this cardboard is going to become hair, curly hair. I cut 17 strips for each nutcracker because they will have 17 curls each. Once I have finished cutting all the strips, I'm going to curl them. And yes, I'm going to curl them before I paint them because I don't want the paint to crack. So it'll be a little tougher painting them, but that's okay because it will get me the look I want. Blue and I are using a pencil to make our curl. I avoid the cat as best I can and curl the entire length, the entire strip, all the way up. Once my initial curl is made, I remove the pencil and coil that little curl even tighter so that it remains in that nice spiral shape. I complete the same process with the other 16 curls, and then we're going to paint them. Yeah, we are. I gently unroll each curl before I paint it. That way it's a little easier to paint, but the shape is still there. I am using a plaid apple barrel matte white paint to paint all of my curls. Now, once they're painted, I will coil them back up so that as the paint dries, it will maintain that nice tight coiled curl. I paint both sides of all 17 curls and set them aside and let them dry. Once they are dry, they are going to get hot glued in 5 different rows onto my nutcracker's head. 2 curls will be up front for little accent curls. Once they're glued into place, I will sugar them. And when I say sugar, I mean sand, because when I do anything gingerbread, to get the look of sugar, I use white sand, not glitter. I just feel the white sand imitates sugar much better. It will be applied with the podge just like our sand was earlier, but I will be more light-handed and sparse with my sugar than I was with that brown sand. Once I finish my curls, I can move on to other details, like his mustache and maybe a beard. Maybe, we'll see. Using the exact same cardboard as I did for the hair, I cut out this cute little mustache. I even curled either end so it resembles the hair. Now, I did make a couple of different types of beards. This is one of them, a curly layered beard. I don't know if I'm going to use any of the beards that I made. I also made a couple of other mustaches because I'm not quite sure how I want this to look, and it's all going to be trial and error. He's going to get to try them on. And we'll see if he looks pretty with any of them. First thing I'm going to do is paint them all white. The same white that I used for the hair. Then I'll set them aside and let them dry. This is a mustache and beard number 2. They have been painted that white, and now I'm going to sugar them. I coat them with Mod Podge, and then I use that cute little spoon. You see that thing? That is a bakery drizzle spoon that I picked up for $1.50 in the baking aisle at Hobby Lobby. It was half off. It was a $2.99 originally, but it works great for sand and glitter and all kinds of fun things. Super handy. Once I get the sand on here, I'm gonna set them aside and let them dry thoroughly. At some point in this process, I will determine if I use the mustache and the beards, and if I do use them, they will get hot glued into place. I will use a thrifted styrofoam ball to create a gingerbread cake pop. The entire bag of 12 only cost me $1.49. I bought them at Goodwill. I will use one of these cake pop sticks to complete the look of a gingerbread cake pop by inserting it into that styrofoam ball. Purchased at Hobby Lobby for $1.50, once again half off in the baking aisle. I hot glued it into place and am now painting it with that gingerbread colored paint. The gingerbread paint is dry, and now I'm coming in with that plaid white paint. I'm going to designate the area that I want covered that is going to resemble chocolate, like this thing was dipped in chocolate, by putting a very thick coat of this paint on. I will immediately sugar it, not letting the paint dry. And yes, you know I mean sand. Once it's completely covered, I'm going to set it aside and let it dry thoroughly. I will also create a little hole in my Nutcracker's hand so he can actually hold the little cake pop. A couple of little thrifted wood disc painted gingerbread will go on top of each of his shoulders. I have also cut out some more cardboard that will act as his belt, which will get glued on momentarily, along with these little stars. The stars will act as buttons. I bought the entire case, actually 2 cases on clearance at Hobby Lobby for $4.99 each. They are a wood pile. I hot glue on the belt, his little star buttons, and the little tops of his shoulders. Then I will paint them all in that gingerbread. Then I Mod Podge and sand them, and then come back and paint them again. This will give me that texture of the rest of the Nutcracker. I thought he needed some facial features, so I created these eyes, eyebrows, and the little teeth. Plus, I also made him a little belt buckle for that little belt. All from that cardboard that I've been using all along. They will be applied in the same fashion as his star buttons and belt. I'm also creating some holly leaves out of that same cardboard. I'm going to cut a whole bunch of them out. I am going to paint them marsh green, which is an apple barrel plaid. Once dry, I will come in with my dimensional paint and make little veins. I'll let that dry, then paint it green again, and then I will sugar them. Then they will be placed all around my little Nutcracker. I will also sugar some of these cute little berries that I picked up in a package at Hobby Lobby a couple years ago on clearance.
That was a lot. I gotta admit, that was more than I bargained for, but I'm glad I did it. I tell you what, let's look at what I've got done. I didn't finish both Nutcrackers. I didn't. I'll show you where one is, and I'll show you the other one that's complete, or kind of complete, and I'll explain what I'm talking about when we look at them.
Just a little reminder of where we started. Now let's take a look at Nutcracker that's not finished. Nutcracker number 2, please step forward. Here he is. As you can see, all the really hard work is complete. His arm is in place. The little cavity for the Nutcracker mechanism is open, and his handle is in the back. I still have to sand him and decorate him and fill his little crack on his elbow, but he looks really good, and he will be decorated different than the other Nutcracker. let's take a look at Nutcracker number 1. Please step forward. Here he is. Look at him. Isn't he fabulous? Ha! I fooled you. I fooled you. Do you really want to see him? Do you, huh? Do you, huh? Well, here he is. I am so happy with the outcome. And when I said he wasn't all the way done, that's because I want to do a base, a big, nice pedestal base for him. And it will be gingerbread decor as well. But I absolutely love the way he came out. I added the first curly mustache. I did not add a beard to him because I liked seeing the cavity for the actual working part of what would be a Nutcracker mechanism. Absolutely love him. Let's take a look at his little hat. I added those holly, berries, and leaves, and a snowflake that I painted to look like a gingerbread cookie. The snowflakes are a bowl filler that came from the Dollar Tree, and I've used them before. I'll put a link in the description box of the video where I decorated them differently. I also used all 3 elements on the base. I used my dimensional paint and my sugar sand on the laces of his boots. I used the same dimensional paint sand detail for little buttons on his cuffs. And yes, I created cuffs, just like I did his belt. Look at the cake pop. How cute, right? And I added the holly on that as well. There's his handsome profile. Look at his nose. So much better than that little button thing. And his debonair mustache. I love it. I went with the smaller one, but here's the star of the show are those curls. Look at those curls. I think I got really close to the look I was after. This is how he looks from the back. As always, I have gone 360, decorating every side of this little character. I love every aspect of my neutral gingerbread Nutcracker, from his little eyes to his brand new nose to his tiny little teeth, all the way down to his fancy gingerbread boots. I can't wait to finish his pedestal and his friend Nutcracker number 2. I will be showing all of that in a future video. Thanks again to my co-hosts, Monica and Jody, for joining me in this Can't Sleep Creations Gingerbread in July. You're going to find the links to their channels and this playlist in my description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, share it with your family and friends, and anyone that likes DIYs, thrifting, repurposing, gingerbread, and Christmas decor. You can follow me on Instagram, and don't forget to check out my shop on Etsy. Leave me a comment. I would absolutely love to hear from you. Ring the bell for notifications of all my upcoming videos. Subscribe. It's a great way to support my channel. But for now, this is Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.